Okay, I'm back.
All right, cool. All right, so we'll get started. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to our fourth webinar at the CSS HR Webinar Series. We would like to switch this one up a bit and make it as interactive as possible. So throughout our time, we encourage you to send any and all questions that you may have as soon as you have them. And we would like our attendees to really guide the topics today, so we will immediately answer your question and then continue the conversation. Quick housekeeping item, Nick Life, our technical moderator, has muted everyone. So if you're new to Zoom, you place your mouse on the top right corner of the screen to control your individual viewing options. And this will help you adjust your screen so that you can view only the speakers of the presentation. And you also have the ability to send a question privately to myself or to everyone in attendance through the drop down in the chat box. So that being said, my name is Kara Ward. For those of you who don't know me, I am a senior account executive with CSS, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of the team for almost 4 years now. And I'm so thrilled to be a part of this conversation regarding HR adjusting culture and talent brand. Prior to current events, this topic was actually in high demand for discussion. And has become something that I'm discussing with HR professionals on a daily basis. We all know there's a lot of fear of the unknown, but there's also so much room for creativity, which is really exciting. So Evan and Pam will join us in driving this conversation, both with a strong presence in the HR world. I am looking forward to diving into these topics today. So like I said, we would love for the audience to drive the direction of our discussion today. So we'd like to ask the audience, what is top of mind for you? If you take a look at the screen, all your responses will remain anonymous, so other participants will not be able to view your selection. So please take a look and vote for your preference. So which of the following is top of mind for you? Presenting your culture virtually, driving your culture in a segmented return to work environment, boosting employee engagement, or adapting your talent brand to grow the employee experience and generate better referrals. Okay, so while we're collecting your responses, I want to introduce everyone to our guest, Pam Seplow. Pam is the founder of PS² Advisors. She is a talent strategist, recognized thought leader, and coach with a successful career as a human resources and talent management practitioner and executive. In partnering with clients, Pam brings her unique set of experiences and insights to consult on the creation of employee experience and talent management programs, as well as share perspective on how to integrate these practices across an organization. Over her career, Pam has worked with organizations of all sizes, including SAP and Accolade, to create impactful employee experiences, talent acquisition, talent management, internal communications, leadership development, and corporate and social responsibility strategies and programs. In addition to her client work, Pam has served on the all-volunteer leadership team of the Komen 3-Day for the Cure for over 17 years and serves on the board of directors for Girls Spark and is a volunteer with the Ronald McDonald House. Okay. All right, looks like we have a response from the audience. Okay, so boosting employee engagement was the most voted for, which makes complete sense. So the good news is that Pam and Evan will be covering all of these topics today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what tips they have. Now I'd like to introduce our host, Evan Violette. Evan is the Managing Director of the Professional Staffing Group here at CSS. He's been with CSS as a leader in the HR industry for over 8 years. His leadership has played a significant role in the repeat business from 90% of our client base. So now I'll pass it off to Evan so he can tell you a little bit more about himself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kara. Again, my name's Evan Violette, and similar to Kara, I'm really looking forward to discussing these topics today. So thank you everyone for participating in our first survey. Just a little bit more about myself. I lead a team who has supported the hiring of more than 27,000 employees in temporary, contract, and direct hire roles nationwide. Our team understands how great talent can make a real difference in human resources, call center, office, and accounting and finance roles. A little bit over a month ago, Contemporary Staffing started 4 different series of webinars. Our series include health and wellness, Salesforce tips, sales team webinars, and this one, our HR Focus series. Our HR series of webinars is for target audiences that include human resources professionals, talent acquisition leaders who are currently partnering with the C-suite and leading business partners with remote employees who are adjusting to the new way of doing business. Kara, I enjoyed what you mentioned in regards to creativity. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for companies and talent acquisition and HR leaders to drive creativity and really promote their culture and boost employee engagement. Every organization has a different style of culture and goals. So we are hoping that by covering all of these topics today, we can cover what is most important to you all and drive some engagement. So like Kara said, feel free to hop into the conversation at any time by using our chat box. So the first topic we'd like to discuss today is how to present your culture virtually. Kara shared a story, in regards to how there's a lot of creativity that can happen with driving more employee engagement and really boosting the company morale while we're sitting and working remotely. One of the things that we've heard recently is that, candidates are asking, why should we want to join your company? What makes your company unique? And Pam, I'll pose the first question to you in regards to a passive job seeker or any candidate that may be looking to leave their role. Why should they want to work virtually for an organization? What really makes organizations stand out in a virtual and remote world?
Yeah, Evan, it's such a great question. And I think organizations are needing to obviously think even more heavily about this topic, given the current COVID-19 situation and the fact that so many more people are obviously working remote. So I think for me, the answer really has two parts to it. One is your talent brand, your career website should always be highlighting the best that your organization has to offer. And so I think that's regardless of the current situation. And so it should include things like videos of your company, videos of employees of your company talking about why they love working there or how they get to use their skills and experiences to the best of their ability every day. Again, really just highlighting the best that your company has to offer. I think in this day and age where people aren't able to come into an office for an interview and to get a feel or a vibe for what your office is like, TA folks and talent marketers could invest in putting together more slideshows or putting together pictures that they've had from past events that highlight the look and the feel of the office so that people get a sense of what it's like to be part of your culture, even if they're not walking in the door to see that real time and live. And so I think there's an opportunity for people to do more of that, regardless of the situation that we're currently in. But then I think the second thing to consider is as you've got candidates coming into your virtual doors, let's say, so as you've got them on the phone, as you're talking to them about the organization, really highlighting, I think, your culture as part of the conversation and not necessarily explicitly, but more implicitly, but the types of questions that you're asking, the tone that you're using, the phrases that you're using, how you talk about your company culture, using examples. I think there's so many really good examples of how organizations have shown up demonstrating their values as they're managing through COVID-19. So having a library or a toolkit of those stories that you can share with candidates, I think is going to be super important. And then I think, and we'll talk more about this later on, I know, but as you think about whether or not work moving forward for your organization is going to remain virtual or remote, also thinking about the types of interview questions that you could be asking candidates that show them that you actually care about the type of work environment that matters to them and what's most important to them. Also trying to understand how do they manage their day, which sounds like such a basic question at every level of an organization, regardless of the role that you're interviewing for. But people structure their day really differently when they work from home, obviously, than when they're working in the office. And so understanding that about a candidate, I think, is super important. But likewise, I think it gives the candidate a sense of what your organization is like. And again, I think there's some really great examples of organizations that have done some really amazing things to help transition their current employees to be work from home, but also are implementing that moving forward. So as an example, I know of an organization that pretty early on had their employees working from home, or at least the ones that could, knowing that in the past they had been primarily in the office environment. And so they just gave everybody $300 to outfit their home office in a way that would make them comfortable. That could have been lighting, that could have been office supplies. Maybe I didn't have a printer at home because I never printed anything out at home before. Desk chair, just to spend it however you need to make your work environment work for you in these weird and sort of uncharted territories.
Those
So
are great
those
examples,
are the two things
Pam.
that I think about when I think about that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And all really great examples, Pam. I think one of the things you said that really, stands out is just how employees are adjusting their working schedule, working remotely, and asking that and building that into an interview question is something that, it's really enlightening. It's not something that I think most people are thinking of is, how people are really having to adjust their working life. Pam, it's really important to show employees how companies show up, right? And we talk a lot now that we've been in this for quite some time. It's been, 2 months now for many parts of the country. One of the things that I think really stands out is what companies have done and what leaders have done to really show up. And just, an example that I think we're really proud of at CSS is within the first day of moving everyone to a remote workforce, a lot of people in the Philadelphia area specifically, we're very concerned about what's this mean for my job. And we're fortunate enough to have a company and our owners that, openly had a company-wide conference saying that the owners were going to cut their salaries to maintain as much, employee headcount and drive our business forward, through this crisis as possible. So, it's really important to share those stories and to not be bashful about it, because I think for candidates that are jumping on board to a new company, they don't know what they don't know. And like you said, building that into part of the interview is certainly a great idea.
Yeah, and Evan, if I could just add, I think that's not only important through the interview process, but I mean, if I'm afraid for my job or I don't know what the company is thinking in terms of that, I as an employee can't show up fully engaged. And so I noticed, obviously, in the polling question, how do you drive more engagement was the topic that was most on people's mind. Being really clear and transparent about that, takes the edge off. Because if I'm afraid for my job, I'm not showing up every day in the best way that I can. And I'm definitely not as productive or as effective as I can be because I'm worried about all of these other things. And so I think that's a great example, not only to share with candidates about how CSS, but about other organizations that have come out with similar types of messages from a candidate perspective, but also from an employee retention perspective. It's just a great way, I think, to retain employees and to show up for your employees in the way that you've always said that you would show up for your employees.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which brings us to our next topic, which I know was, evidenced by our first survey, one that's really important. So Pam, we'll throw it to Kara, but prior to that, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we keep our employees engaged and keep spirits high when we are not physically close by. And Kara, we'll let you lead us through the question.
All right, so we want to hear from everyone. What are your thoughts towards your organization's adjusted plan to improve company-wide employee engagement so that it accommodates both in-office and remote team members? We currently have a great employee engagement. We don't really have one, but need one. We are currently working on improving employee engagement, and we need better ideas to improve our employee engagement. Curious to see what everyone comes up with. This is a good one.
And it's interesting too, just how many, articles there are on LinkedIn just about what some leading companies are doing and, seeing the pictures and just kind of looking from a distance virtually at what some of the other companies locally and nationally are doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, Evan, again, like going back to the first point we were having, those are all things that make me think, and especially today because unemployment is at such a record high right now, but those are the types of things that make me think, oh, I'd like to go research that company, learn more. Is there a role for me available there? Because look at how amazing they've been at treating their employees through all of this. And again, those are things that either intentionally or unintentionally you're driving as an organization, whether you need to or not. So you might as well be really intentional about how you think about that.
Definitely. And the results just popped up on our screen. So it looks like a lot of people looking for, we need better ideas to improve our employee engagement. And a runner-up to that is, a lot of companies are currently working on that. So very common, and hopefully, Pam, we can talk through some of those. But Pam, back to my question, how do we keep employees engaged and particularly keep spirits high when we're not in the office together?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think I think a lot of organizations were struggling with employee engagement prior to COVID-19. And so this is just sort of amplifying the question for them. But I also noticed that about 17% of folks on the phone said that they have a great engagement. I would love, Kara, if it's not overstepping, for people to chat in sort of what they're doing about it. So it's not just Evan and I having this conversation, but everybody engaging in it. Because I'm sure there's a ton of really great learnings from folks on the phone as well. So I think when it comes to employee engagement, it's always about the basics. And so it's about trust. Do you trust your employees to do the job that you've hired them to do? And how do you demonstrate that trust to them? Are you communicating to them what's going on? And not only what's going on, but the why behind the decisions that you're making. If people don't understand the why, it's really hard, I think, for them to get behind doing whatever needs to be done. And then the last piece, as being as transparent as you can with employees, especially in today's environment. Evan, going back to what you said earlier about the messages that the senior leaders at CSS sent out, right, early on, saying, this is what we know, that this is going to be difficult. This is what we're doing. We want to try and ensure that we don't need to do layoffs. And so these are the measures that we're taking. And so people got, I'm guessing people got really behind that because they saw that the leadership team was really bought into trying to make a difference as well. But that takes a lot of vulnerability to put that out there to your entire workforce. But being transparent is so critical, I think, to building employee engagement, because it's so critical to building trust, which is at the core of employee engagement. And again, I think those things have always been important. It just gets amplified even more now because people aren't in the office. They're not seeing each other face to face. In absence of that kind of communication, in absence of no information, people will make up whatever stories they want, right? And that's just human nature. So I think that there are, I think being really open and transparent with your employees, there's some really good public examples, like as an example, Airbnb, who recently laid off a pretty large percentage of their workforce, but they were super open and super transparent about what they were doing, why they were doing it, what it meant for the different, I'll call them categories of employees who were being impacted. So everybody across the organization understood that. And so I think even for people who were leaving, they felt respected and they felt like their organization was helping to take care of them in a way, which again, just boosts employee engagement. And then I think there's some things that you can do on a really, really tactical level to try and replicate the environment that you had in the office without everybody being in the office, but trying to bring everybody together. And so I love on this slide the picture of the Zoom party, because Zoom or WebEx or Skype or Google Hangouts has become so much the mode of way we can interact with each other. And so trying to bring people together in a way through technology is a great way to boost employee engagement. But again, you need to be intentional about why you're doing it and what the purpose is. So I've heard of organizations that they're scattered throughout the United States, but they contacted local pizza places in their area and ordered a pizza that got sent to everybody's house on the same day. And then they invited, based on time zone, people to their pizza happy hour, which I thought was a great idea. It not only boosted employee engagement, it not only brought people together not in a meeting setting, but in a really informal setting, but they also did an amazing thing for local businesses that are also trying to stay afoot in this by ordering the pizzas from those local companies. I saw somebody chatted in about offering virtual exercise and yoga classes. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love that.
That's such a great idea. I love that idea. Yeah, and then companies, whether they were thinking that they were a technology company or not, everybody's becoming a technology company because they have to in order to maintain their business. And there are some amazing ways to do things like virtual birthday cards or congratulation cards, or just I'm thinking about you cards. So there's an organization or a website that I love called Kudo Boards, where you can set up a virtual card, you can send it out to a whole group of people, they can type in their messages or put in a GIF or a picture or a slogan, whatever you want your message to be. And then whoever organized it just sends the link to the recipient on the day that they need to receive it. And so think about it as a virtual way of passing around the birthday card in the office, which again, just shows that somebody gave a minute's worth of thought to something that's important to me, which is all employees want from an employee engagement perspective. And so those are some examples. that I think really help both at the sort of higher level, enterprise level, but also at the really tactical level. I think just checking in, if you're a manager now who's managing a virtual team, just checking in with your team every morning, starting a morning chat saying, hey, hope everybody had a good night. I know the question, how was your weekend, or what did you do over the weekend, is a bit like Groundhog Day these days, but even still checking in with people. And we were talking right before the call started about how working from home is giving everybody a bit of a sense of who their colleagues are more personally, because you're getting to see people's workspaces and how people are showing up from their homes. And that can drive, if you're intentional about it, that can also help to boost employee engagement.
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. And those, the pizza party and the kudos boards, I mean, those are all great ideas and great examples. You know, one of the things that we are really striving to do is we set forth as a leadership team this year with community service as one of our top 3 initiatives. And,
I love that.
We had highlighted different services that we would do throughout the year, and some of those were just unfortunately put on hold due to social distancing. But we are exploring how we can still promote the culture of service virtually. And, you know, those are some things that we've really leaned on our employees to share with us about, you know, what's engaging them and what would they be interested in doing. And, you know, that's actually something, quite frankly, that we're talking about today. So we're right in the midst of all of that.
Yeah.
We got some questions coming in, guys. Sorry to interrupt. So I'm just going to read to you. So if someone's self-motivated and loves purpose, small teams can feel disconnected. So what can leaders do to improve this virtually? Which I think that's a really good question for small teams. So what do you guys, any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that you can do. I think leaders, and this is really hard if you're, I think really hard if you're used to leading a team that's always in the office, and so you have a lot of coffee corner chatter or like people talking over the cubicles at each other. It's really hard to replicate that in a virtual kind of environment. So again, taking advantage of the technology that you have access to, whether it's Zoom or Slack, to start some kind of a way to start a daily dialogue with people. It could be, what did you binge watch last night? Or in a former organization on Fridays, we used to do this thing called peaks and pits. And so everybody would share what their peak of the week was and what their pit of the week was. It could be, it could have been work related. It could have been personal. It could have been, my peak could have been celebrating another colleague that did something amazing or that I got to witness. But it was a way just to get people to feel connected. It could be a question that you start every team meeting with, and maybe it's a different question every time. I also think it's not just up to the leader to drive that. And so there are some really good examples, I think, where, again, depending upon the size of your team, every day somebody else is responsible for starting that morning chat. And so let's just say you have 5 people on your team, which would make it super, super easy. Then every Monday, I would be responsible for starting the morning chat. Tuesdays, Kara would be. Wednesday, Evan would be. Let your team have some creativity in how they want to be engaged. There have also been some really great examples of teams who are doing like book clubs together. So, or everybody's watching the same TV show, and then once a week you get together and talk about that. There have been some examples of more at the organizational level where they're setting up hobby clubs. And so anybody who's a gardener could join this channel and just chat about gardening all day, or starting a club around Netflix or whatever your hobby might be. Especially for people who have hobbies for which they can't do them right now because of the physical distancing that we're under. So it's a great way to bring a larger organization together around some common ground that you might not have even realized that you had with other employees. I saw some other things popping up in the chat, Sarah, so I'm not sure if there's other ideas to be shared.
Yeah, so we actually got a lot, so thanks everyone for sharing. So some companies are doing virtual lunches and happy hours, virtual mentor meeting, and I love the sending coffee coupons digitally for attending. That's awesome.
Oh, that's a great idea.
From CEO, yeah. Virtual meditation and yoga, so all great stuff. And then for social interactions, one company is starting social groups for shared interests, completely employee run. Oh, for not work related interests. Very cool.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
then
that's like the hobby idea. Love that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of for seeing that a lot of companies are looking for some ideas. We certainly have some great ideas building up in the chat feature. And Pam, thank you for some of the others. I think
Evan, I
we should also.
Evan, sorry, before you go on, I didn't mean to cut you off. I also saw that somebody chatted in, which I had meant to mention earlier, that they were actually surveying their employees to find out what was important to them,
Right.
which is obviously the smartest thing. One of the smartest things that you can do is, it's one thing as HR professionals for us to like sit in a room together and whiteboard all of these ideas, but actually what might really be important to your employee from boosting engagement is that you say, actually every day, not every organization can do this, but we're actually closed from 12 to 1:30 so that if you have children, you can go eat lunch with your children, right? I think the other really big thing that people are doing around this topic is offering employees, specifically parents, but not only parents, the flexibility where possible to work the hours that they need to, right? So I know one company that has said, with a schedule around it so that they always have coverage, but for folks that don't have children, they're working sort of more midday hours. For folks that have children and need some kind of help with childcare, they're going to be working more early morning hours and later afternoon or evening hours because it works better for their schedule with childcare. And so working with your employees, particularly for the person who asked about a small team, making sure what's really important to your employees, each individual employee. Evan, I think you'd had a guest on a couple of weeks ago on this show who said, we're all in the same form, but we're not all in the same boat, which I thought was just so amazing, because what my life looks like at home, given this, might be very different than what your life looks like with a small child at home.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you really understand the motivation and the need of each one of your employees is probably the best thing you can do in terms of boosting employee engagement.
Absolutely. And I see a lot of talks about surveys, and I certainly recognize that for some companies, surveys are a lot more feasible than others. But if someone is working at a company where surveys just may not be as feasible or may not be the right course of action, certainly employing through middle management to just do check-ins and ask for report cards from the employees.
Absolutely.
How are we doing? What advice could you provide us? Every Monday at 1:30, our CFO leads a leadership call where it's really, you would think with the CFO, it's about talking about numbers, but it's really not. It's about how are the employees? Give us a pulse. What do we need to do differently this week? And really revisiting it every single week has been very important. So just small things like asking some of the employees, how are we doing and what advice do you have? I think will give a lot of, helpful insight. So Pam, a lot of companies are preparing to go back, depending on what state and what the local government is allowing. And certainly companies now have top of mind, and as many leaders and employees do, what does this look like? So as some of us return physically into the work environment, how do we find the balance and drive our culture in a segmented return to work?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Evan. And there's so many different dimensions to this question. I think so much of it, again, depends on the industry or the type of company that you're a part of. And so in addition to whatever government, either federal, local, state requirements and policies they're going to put around it, I think you're also going to see industry policies coming out because different industries are going to need to handle this differently depending upon what their situation is. And I think the workplace and the experience that people get in their workplace, the physical space that you sit, is so critical to the overall experience that people have. It also drives or minimizes the employee engagement you see. And so some things that I know I've been talking to my clients about, and I know Evan, you guys have been talking to your clients about, is what is your office space look like? Is the office design physically set up to have people physically distanced from each other? If you have coffee corners, what does that look like? Do you still have coffee urns, or you press the button for the coffee makers? Do you still have those for people? So many companies, when they talk about the benefits of working for their organization, are those sort of intangible perks, like we offer free coffee. Well, can you still offer free coffee? Yes, but it probably looks a little bit differently than you've looked at it before. It's also thinking about things like, What's your sign-in policy when you have people come into your office and you need them to sign a ledger? Like, I'm thinking about, is that pen been cleaned? And so do you have a bin for clean pens and a bin for dirty pens, so people know that you're thinking about these things? Where do you put hand sanitizer that maybe you never had it before? There's so many nitty-gritty things that you need to think about as you're bringing people back into the workplace. You and I talked about this, and I hate this return to work notion, because so many of us have been working. We've just not been working in our physical location. And so office space and how you think about bringing people back into your office space is going to say as much about your culture as anything that you actually verbally say about your culture, in terms of the kinds of things that you're thinking about, not only for your employees, but for any guests or visitors that have come in. I also know organizations are starting to think about shift workers in different ways than we've probably thought about them before in a manufacturing plant, but actually dividing out who's in the office Monday, Wednesday, and Friday versus who's in the office Tuesday, Thursday. I think employees are going to need to start thinking about the work week and the work day differently as well, in terms of, does my company now go to a 6-day work week? I'm still only working my 40 hours, but those 40 hours just look really different. And again, and I think we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but particularly for your employees who have children, with schools continuing to be closed, with most summer camp programs probably looking very different. I think the biggest challenge that organizations are going to have in returning people to the workplace is how they're helping their employees manage childcare situations, and or if you care for an elderly parent, any type of additional care that you might need to be giving the folks either in your home or outside of your home that need to be considered. I think that is going to be a place where employers really struggle, employees really struggle. And again, if you're asking your employees what's most to them, where you can really drive employee engagement, both tangibly and intangibly moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, transparency is so key in the fact that, the talks are happening. You can't really read a headline or, watch television without hearing that, a lot of companies and a lot of states are working towards this plan. So that transparency will hopefully minimize any sort of anxiety, but also set companies up to be successful as they, like you said, Pam, return to the office. We've all been working for sure. So, that brings me to the greatest.
I was reminded, I just saw this in my newsfeed on LinkedIn yesterday. Former colleague who works outside of the United States in a country that's more open than we are, they returned to their workplace earlier, or I guess yesterday, because it was just Monday. On everybody's desk was a bottle of hand sanitizer with a note that said, "We missed having you here." And like some other street was at their desk. But I love the idea that everybody got their own personal hand sanitizer. Again, it's like a small detail, but so impactful for an employee who might be fearful or might have had reservations about coming back to the workplace.
Absolutely. That's a great example, Pam. Thank you for sharing. One of the biggest debates I feel is coming as a result of this, and we've discussed it in previous webinars, is, do employees really need to be in the office? And I think, we've definitely got an opportunity to kind of dig a little bit deeper here. So Kara, I'll let you walk us through the survey.
Thanks, Evan. So what do you guys think? By the end of 2020, do you expect to have your office workforce be fully remote, a mix of remote and in office, fully back into the office space, or we will leave it entirely up to our employees? It's coincidence because I actually got a question from somebody asking, if we think companies will view working remote more positively after the pandemic. So yeah, I'm interested to see what people vote on for this one. I would say, I think
it's
a mix of remote and in office. But I know all companies are different.
I agree. I think that there's definitely going to be a large portion of people that are getting used to this new normal, but, even just on our team, Kara, there's a mix of people like, oh, I'm just really ready to get back. I like that, vibe being in the office, but then there's others where, it's just working out a little bit better given the circumstances to be home and settling
Yeah.
into.
And I love one of the comments that we got in the chat box. We have a task force split into 3 different focuses for the return to physical location, and they call it going forward to work. I like that.
That's great.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it looks like 66% is a mix of remote and in office. So Evan, you and I were right.
Yeah, so Pam, I'm interested to gather your thoughts towards employees continuing to, to continue to work from home. Obviously, there's a lot of companies that are looking to do a blend of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I think a lot of it depends on the industry, the roles that you have within your organization. So it's going to vary, obviously. But I think one of the things that organizations, particularly organizations that are looking at some kind of a blended model, the first step for me and what I've been coaching my clients on is really identifying what roles absolutely have to be in the office versus which roles can absolutely be done at home. And that's, to me, that's sort of your starting point, because then you sort of said, okay, this target group, for whatever reason, has to be in the office. And so we need to figure out how to bring them back into the workplace safely, and make sure that we're minimizing their risk from all the different ways that we've talked about earlier in terms of what that space looks like. And then once you have the sense of how many people that is, that I think will give you some indication of, okay, well, we've got enough space that we could flexibly allow other people to come back into the office. What would that look like? And how would we do that? The thing that I want to highlight here is, as you're thinking about bringing people back into the workplace, safety is on everybody's mind right now. And so if you feel as though you can't safely bring more people back than absolutely have to come back, even though you've got people who may be clamoring to come back because they're not productive at home, or they're not as efficient at home, or they just like that separation, being, again, really transparent about the decisions that you're making and why you're making it. And so if you have an organization, let's say, that has a lab or some kind of a manufacturing element to it, those people probably have to be in the office. And so if that's half your population, then keeping the rest of your population at bay and at home is probably the right thing to do for the safety of the people who absolutely have to be in the office. And so I think that's the first step, is what roles absolutely positively have to be in the office versus which roles can absolutely be done at home, because you've just generally proven that they can be done at home. But there are also going to be some industries, like retail as an example, where people haven't been working at all because retail hasn't been open in the way we're used to it being open. And then making sure that those employees feel safe, and you've thought about how to bring them back. Again, working within the guidelines given by federal, state, local governments, et cetera. And so I think, and then giving people flexibility to come back in a way that makes sense for them. So again, I think one of the biggest challenges that organizations are going to face in bringing people back into the workforce is how are people dealing with childcare, because that's been obviously such a huge issue. But organizations are going to have to figure out how to deal with the situation for people who have to be in the office versus people who want to be in the office, and prepare for people who don't want to be in the office and actually have loved this setup for whatever reason. And organizations are just going to need to figure out flexibility for their employees, and there are going to need to be some guidelines and boundaries around how you do that, so that people feel like they're being treated fairly and there's no discrimination around who can work in the office, who can't work in the office, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pam, I think that, the big thing is that really continuing to work remotely is much different than what we experienced 2 months ago, where we were forced to work remotely. And I think that a big part of what will drive the success is, I kind of refer to it as the 3 T's: technology, transparency, and trust. And, it takes all 3 of those aligning together with the corporate initiatives and the employees to really make this work. So, the fact that employees, oh, go ahead, Pam.
I was going to say, I think we've talked about this throughout the session. I think trust underlines all of this. If you don't trust the work from home, you probably have a different situation on your hand with that particular employee, but trust underlines all of this, in assuming that your employees are adults and they get their work done and all of those types of things.
Absolutely. And, I know we've got the summer months coming up. So, we talked a little bit earlier about how here at CSS, part of our culture is very service-based. And we're trying to figure out, different creative ways, Pam, to drive that part of our culture forward. It's very important to our employee base, which we've learned through surveys and, talking to the employees over the years. It really drives the question on how do we think of all of these things differently moving forward in what may end up being for quite some time a blended remote work and in office work environment. And companies still pushing things like community service and summer outings and summer parties, things of that nature. So Pam, what are some of your thoughts and insight into how we should start maybe thinking of these things a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of my time obviously thinking about culture and employee experience, and it's you can already see it like flipping on its head 180 degrees from how people used to think about these things. So, and again, these are things that current employees care about from a retention perspective, but they're also the things that your candidates are going to care about moving forward. And so investing in and being really intentional about how you think about these things and what makes sense for your culture, for your set of values, for the behaviors that you're driving throughout your organization. There's not a one size fits all for this. But I have a client who hosts summer, they have 4 different offices. They host a summer picnic basically in each one of those office locations. And every year it looks a little bit different depending upon the location. But this year the senior leadership team, obviously not bringing people together in that way. So they decided that they would send out a poll to each one of their office locations. And I think in each office location, they gave employees a choice of 1 of 5 charitable organizations that serve that community, and employees could vote where they wanted the budget for the summer picnic to go. So they're not getting to participate in the summer picnic, but the money that the organization would have spent on that, employees got a voice in where that money was going. And I know of another client who recently, will start this, the summer, instead of a summer picnic, they're calling it the summer picture. And so they're encouraging employees to submit through their portal pictures of how people are spending their summer that might look different than your normal summer vacation pictures look, right? I think I'm envisioning there's going to be a lot of yard work projects going on there and a lot of trying to figure out how to entertain children in people's backyards. But again, that helps to feel like people are together, even though we're physically distanced from each other. And then I think there are other really good examples of how employers are trying to take care of their employees. So Google recently announced as an example, and there have been a few other companies that have jumped on board, encouraging all of their employees to take this Friday as a vacation day to turn the Memorial Day weekend into a 4-day weekend, because what they've noticed is a dramatic drop in people taking vacation days through all of this. People aren't going anywhere, so they don't feel the need to take a vacation day or vacation. But part of taking a vacation is that mental break that you get and sort of that recharge that you get. And so they're encouraging all employees to take Friday as a mental health day off. They're not charging people for vacation days for that, just take it off because we care about your mental health. And so I think organizations are going to need to get really creative about how they think about those things from an employee experience perspective. And there's lots of opportunities, I think, for individuals to volunteer in their communities in a one-off basis. So Evan, Kara mentioned at the beginning, and I know that the Ronald McDonald House is something that's really important to CSS as well. They obviously aren't using volunteers right now, but through a community Facebook group, there's 3 senior centers in my neighborhood that were looking for volunteers to drop off food boxes. And so instead of the hours that I normally put in at the Ronald McDonald House, instead once a week I just go drop off 9 meals to 9 families. It's no contact, you just drop it on the porch. So encouraging your employees, or even providing a list to your employees of ways that they can give back to their community, which I think is something that a lot of people are wanting to do right now because they're feeling a bit helpless about all of this.
Those are all wonderful ideas, Pam, and thank you for your service. I know it's very important to you as well, and it's great to talk to someone like yourself that's a leader in finding ways to still do what is most important, providing that type of service to your neighbors. So Pam, as we wrap things up here in our conversation, it's really important to switch gears and just discuss recruiting efforts and talent brand. And obviously, because of the recent changes, there's a lot of challenges that recruiters are having in this new, this new landscape. So I'll throw it over to Kara to take us through our survey.
All right, so our next question for everyone is, what challenges are you facing as an HR professional when it comes to recruiting and talent brand? So A, overflow in resumes, underqualified or overqualified candidates, offer being rejected by candidate due to the uncertain times, or my company has stopped hiring for the time being. I think this is really interesting because I was actually talking with one of my clients last week, and they were telling me how they're getting frustrated because a lot of offers that they are giving out have been rejected. Candidates are just really uncertain about making a move right now. So I'm interested to just kind of learn a little bit more about what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think that's, kind of bringing us back to just making sure you're having, like Pam said, the right conversation in the interviews, Kara. But obviously, we'll learn what's going on out there and take a little bit of a deeper dive.
All right, so 40% was offer being rejected by candidate due to the uncertain times. And then the runner-up was actually underqualified or overqualified candidates. And I know that's actually a big one because right now there's probably, a lot of people applying, but, they may not be the right fit.
Totally. And to your point, Kara, I mean, it's gotten so easy over the years to apply to jobs almost without really having to look at a job description. So certainly can lead to that, that number being so high. But Pam, let's turn it over to you and just talk through some of these challenges that recruiters are inevitably going to have to face when discussing their talent brand and recruiting in this new landscape.
Yeah, first of all, I think I was expecting the number of, or the percentage of organizations or people on the phone to say that their companies have stopped hiring to be so much higher, given all the news about companies that have stopped hiring and unemployment. I mean, it's baffling to me or fascinating and baffling all at the same time that basically in a span of, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks, we went from having as a country one of the lowest employment rates ever to having one of the highest employment rates ever. And so I was super surprised that number wasn't a little bit higher, but thrilled to see that. So I think a couple of things are really important. First of all, I think recruiters anyway have a super tough job. Just generally, it is a hard job to be a recruiter. And this makes it even more challenging. But recruiters, I think, tend to often take that responsibility all on their own. And that responsibility, particularly when you're dealing with employees who might be, or candidates who might be a little bit afraid to jump ship right now or move to a different organization because of the uncertainty, it's not just you as a recruiter's responsibility, but it's the hiring manager's responsibility. It's everybody that went through, that was part of that interview discussion. It's part of their responsibility to know that candidates are, this is how candidates are currently thinking. And then to help your hiring managers and help your interview teams figure out ways during the interview to put that fear at rest. Evan, going back to your example, like just saying like, hey, I'm super excited that our CEO came out or our senior leadership team came out and said, we're protecting all of our jobs in this time. And here's how we're doing that. Or there might be parts of your organization that are downsizing, but our team is growing, and here's why our team is so important to the growth strategy of the company. And so making it really personal, but making sure that everybody who's involved in that interview process understands that this might be the mindset of the candidate that you're looking at, is they're going through this process, but they're also a bit leery about changing roles. Sharing stories, we've already talked about a ton of different ways, and people on this call have given some amazing ideas about the things that they're doing to help their employees through this, sharing that with the candidates so that they understand, again, the culture, both explicitly but also implicitly the things that are really important to your organization that are going to be longer term than what we see with COVID-19, whatever that new normal is going to look like. And really during the interview process, especially in that first conversation, understanding what's motivating the candidate to apply for the job in the first place, so that all throughout the interview, and then letting the hiring manager know that all throughout the interview process, you can be sort of overcoming and selling the candidate on the reason why they started looking for the job or took your call in the first place. But I think there's definitely going to be more hunting going on than gathering these days. given some of the answers that we saw.
Yeah, and you know, I know one of our members in the audience mentioned not having start dates is a challenge too. You know, the uncertainty for the company to say we want to start you, but we just don't have a physical date. So,
Yeah.
Pam, I'm interested in what advice you may have surrounding that.
Yeah, it's such a great example, and one that's actually really close to my heart, because my niece through all of this moved from Southern California to Northern California for a job that she got right before all of this happened. And so I had been coaching her through, like, how do you stay in touch with the recruiter? What are you hearing from your hiring manager? What are you seeing on their website? Things like that. So again, transparency, we've been talking about this all throughout. So being really transparent with your candidates about what's going on, when they should expect to hear, you reaching out to them before they have to reach out to you, engaging the hiring manager or other people on that team to keep them engaged during this process. It could be an article that you send them. It could just be, the hiring manager sending a note saying, hey, I just wanted to check in, or even picking up the phone and calling them or texting them, whatever the candidate's preferred method of communication is, but keeping that open line of communication open, because in absence of hearing anything, we all spin up the stories, and those stories are never the positive stories, right? They're always the negative versions. So making sure that you're answering the candidate's questions before they even have to answer them. But again, being really transparent when you don't know the answer. And I think also pushing at your leadership team to remind them, although I know that it's on top of mind for a lot of people, like, if we don't have answers to these questions, we're going to lose some really great talent. And as a result of that, we might lose also some credibility within the marketplace that will hurt us longer term than just the current situation that we're going through.
And Pam, that kind of brings up a good point, you know, the example of your niece and thinking about, you know, a population of recent college graduates. You know, we all hear about the 2020 grads, and I know all of our hearts go out to them on, you know, missing out on what we've all experienced as graduation. But, you know, there's always silver linings and there's always opportunities to find in this. So that kind of brings me to the pre-qualifications necessary for roles. And do you think it's time for companies to start really revisiting some of those prerequisite qualifications for some of their hiring positions?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So for forever, right, generally speaking, depending again on the company that you work for, the industry that you work on, some kind of a college degree has been required. In some cases, an advanced degree has been required. It's almost always the top thing in the requirements list, right? But there are actually very few jobs today there are few jobs, not very few jobs. There are a myriad of jobs today that actually don't require a college education. Now, don't get me wrong, I want my doctor to have gone to medical school, right? I want my lawyer to at least have passed the bar. But if I think about so many roles today, and I mean, Evan, you said it earlier on, or I guess it was while we were waiting to start the call, like what you went to college for and what you intended to do with your life is very, very different than what you're doing today. I think that's the case for most of us, and most of what we've learned on the job. But I also think there's some scary statistics out there, you know, with universities obviously needing to go to digital learning or online learning during this last semester and sort of midway through the semester, and more universities and colleges already calling it for the fall, saying we're definitely not bringing kids back on campus in August, September. We might do it later in the fall or not until January. There's the statistics about how many less kids are going to enroll in college because they want that entire college experience. There's something like 250 to 300,000 less kids will enroll in college in the fall. And so if you think about that, and you think about some portion of them are not going to go back to school ever, or go back in a really different kind of way, I do think organizations are going to need to start rethinking sort of what their ticket to entry is, because it's not the way moving forward. I think kids will get their education, and beyond that, and beyond the current COVID situation, universities are really, really expensive, and so many really good, smart, qualified people, candidates, won't be able to afford to go to a traditional 4-year school, and are going to be doing apprenticeships and more, I think, non-traditional types of co-ops and things like that to get the work experience. And so it should really be about the work experience that we're looking for, and not so much that college degree. Although again, for some industries, for some roles, that college degree, particularly the advanced degree, super, super important. I don't want to discount that in any way, shape, or form, but I do think organizations are going to need to start to be more flexible about that.
Yeah, I agree, Pam. And I think that, you look at how everything's been affected. Higher education is certainly one of those. And it's been very top of mind conversations, I feel like, for the last almost decade. But now I think we're going to start seeing some real changes there. And flexibility, to me, is going to have to be a prerequisite of hiring, right? Organizations are changing things. Like I mentioned, we're looking at our business week over week on just ways that we can continue to enhance given this crisis. So making sure that we're, hiring people that are flexible and willing to be a part of the solution is super important.
Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Pam, you've touched on some really great topics today, and I know that you are just a wealth of knowledge, and I can't thank you enough for being with us. And I know that Kara's going to close us out here.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. So if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Evan or Pam. We're happy to continue the discussion off of the webinar. And thank you to Evan and Pam. This has been a great interactive experience. And thanks everyone for participating. We hope you found our discussion insightful and inspiring. And if anyone, any colleagues, friends or colleagues missed this webinar, look out for a follow-up email of the recording. And as a thank you for joining us today, Pam will actually be offering free 30-minute consultations to 3 webinar attendees today. So winners will be selected at random and will receive a follow-up message. And if anyone has topics that you would like to discuss or share for our next HR webinar series, feel free to reach out to myself or Evan Violette, and our contact information will be provided in the follow-up email. And just to reiterate to everybody, we are launching these HR webinars, and we'll be showcasing various subject matter experts that helps HR leaders navigate through uncharted waters. So if you're passionate about HR and you want to be included in a series, please reach out to any of us or reply to the follow-up that you'll receive from our team. And I also just wanted to add in there, for those of you who know about our Talent Acquisition Leadership Alliance group, we are hosting a webinar on June 10th at 10 a.m. To discuss the current and future state of talent acquisition leaders. And the link will be provided in our follow-up, lots of things in our follow-up, so be sure to check that out. And then can also be found in the chat box, which we will have that link up, and yep, Maribel just sent it, cool. So that's all for today. Thanks again, everyone, so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it, and I hope everyone has a great day, and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.